Good day, YVR. We're the Tribbles. We're here to present to you some training on firelock, muskets and rifles, and black powder safety. The purpose of these videos, well, since we're unable to meet in person, they'll help instruct our soldiers on these weapons, how to handle them safely, how to load and fire them, how to handle misfires, and a little bit about basic maintenance requirements. YVR rules allow members that are 14 years old and are privates to train and fire these at events. Although at events, the supporting units, or the units we support rather, require more stringent requirements for age, etc. Privates that are at least 13, especially those that will be 14 this coming fall, even those a little younger that are interested should view these videos. And it's appropriate for all ages. Video 1, which is this one, will go into some more details about muskets and rifle components, internal, a little bit, and external components. The next video, video 2, will cover basics and more advanced safety rules for handling the weapons, bringing them to camp, and handling them out in the field. Video 3 will step through loading and firing procedures, those for an actual battle, and then the modified ones for reenactments. These videos will be accompanied by additional material, including a training PowerPoint that has the voiceover from these slides, and a training and procedures checklist for black powder safety for YVR. Next. So a little history. I would encourage you to look online with your parents more about muskets, the French Charleville and the British Longland and Shortland pattern muskets. This is a replica British Longland pattern musket that Martin has, designed in 1722. This is 1740s model. Okay, both the French and Indian War and the American War for Independence or Revolutionary War saw these weapons used in our time period in particular. Both sides would have used these weapons. The Americans also used French Charleville muskets, rifles, Fowlers, like shotguns as well in that time period. These weapons and shorter, slightly newer versions of them were used in the War of 1812, Napoleonic Wars, and other wars through the middle of the 19th century. Martin will now show you the external components of the weapon. Starting with, boys, what are the three main components of the weapon? Stock, the lock, and barrel. So if you hear the phrase lock, stock, and barrel, that's where that's from. Go ahead, Mark.
Alright, so for the basics, we have the pan here. What the pan is it helps hold your powder down. So once you're priming your weapon, you put your powder here, and it's to help hold your powder and to help it go through that tiny little hole, if you can see there. Next, we have the frizzen. The frizzen is the strike face, because without the frizzen, you won't be able to get a nice spark and be able to fire your weapon. So you would have this, and then you'd have your cock or hammer. So what you do with this is you pull it back, and once you do it, you'd have a 90-degree angle, so you can successfully strike it and hopefully get an ignite. So what it should look like is, since I don't want to damage my flint, I'm going to show you what it is. So once you pull the trigger, it's going to strike this, pushing the frizzen back, causing sparks, which will ignite the powder in here, which will allow it to flow through the rest of the weapon. Next, these aren't accurate for historical reasons, but for reenactments, you'd have to have them since we're doing close order and it's a rule that we have.
The flash guard, correct?
Then we have the spring, which allows everything to move in this mechanism.
and you're speaking of the frizzen spring here, and there's another spring actually internal, which we'll discuss in a moment. What else is on the barrel, Martin?
What else is on the barrel is you have the ramrod. The ramrod is very important. You cannot use your weapon without the ramrod, at least for actual battles. But for reenactments, since we're not allowed to use them, they stay in. But for actual battles, what you'd have to do is once you put your cartridge down, the cartridge is kind of thick and it won't get all the way down the barrel. So you would pull this out and invert it and then shove it down the barrel to help push your cartridge down. So it can get close enough to this part and use the rest of the stuff for propelling your weapon.
Okay. So what else we have? The sling, and I'll take the weapon. Sling, other parts of the stock, which are wood, lighter, so you're not carrying a solid piece of metal, with some brass, other metal reinforcements. But Martin covered the basics. Okay. Zhang approach. So Zhang has my replica Hawken rifle. Now this is not entirely historically accurate from Revolutionary War period, but if I cover this up, this looks very close to many of the rifles at the time. Maybe in some cases a longer barrel. This is 45 caliber. Some of these are 40 or 50 caliber barrel. They are rifles, so the barrel shape on the outside is a little different. The barrel on the inside obviously has the rifling that'll engage the ball and make it spin to be more accurate. Is there a bayonet sling on here? No. What is this piece?
It's just scope.
Let's be safe. Sight. Sight. Right, front sight, rear sight. Okay. Now this is percussion cap. Weapons of this era would have had it again, the pan, like the Longland pattern musket. All right, you can take that. Back to the musket. So let's look at the internal components of the musket. The rifle would be nearly identical, although smaller. When Martin was speaking of the springs, let's talk to the springs. On the outside is the frizzen spring that holds the frizzen shut. Let me go to half cock. That holds the frizzen shut, and when it strikes it, helps it to pop open. On the inside, there's two other springs. The main spring, and then this very small spring for the trigger mechanism. We call that the trigger sear. This is one of the most important pieces and the thickest spring. The cock or hammer moves this tumbler. So when I go to half cock, it depresses against the spring. When I bring it to full cock, you'll see that piece move slightly. And the trigger sear is out of that thick groove into this thin groove. Now, this thick groove here wouldn't allow the trigger to move. That's half cock. But this thin one allows the trigger to move. So the trigger itself will push this up, and when it releases, the cock or hammer moves forward. And if the frizzen was shut, it would have created sparks. Those are the main components of internal components of the weapon. That's not required to pass the safety training, but it's good to understand a little bit about how that works, particularly for our older youth. Okay?
These are shots captured from a slow motion video of Martin shooting his musket. I apologize for the farb. There are the sparks from the flint hitting the frizzen. There is the priming charge being ignited by the sparks, and momentarily the muzzle flash as the main charge lights off. You can see how the muzzle flash develops and then dissipates, showering sparks everywhere. You can see why we have the standoff distance.
So we've discussed the components, both internal and external, of the musket. Talked a little bit about rifles as well. Okay. In the next video, we will go through the loading procedures and safety on the field, safety to be prepared to come to the field, misfire procedures, and other things. Thank you. Good day.